I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. Welcome to another edition of Women's Health Unplugged. I am pretty excited to have this guest on the podcast with me, Dr. Stacy Thomas, who is a psychologist practicing in Toronto, but also working with women online, and we're going to hear quite a bit about her. I reached out to Stacy quite a while ago when I first heard her talking about maternal mental health in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And even though it was 9 months ago, this is actually still a really relevant conversation, talking about women's health, talking about maternal mental health, and talking about the mental health of mothers and parents as we are, I hate the word unprecedented at this point, but as we navigate unprecedented levels of responsibility and chaos in the life of parents and women. Stacy, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Jordan, for inviting me here. I love these kinds of conversations.
I feel like this is going to be a good one, especially today in Ontario was when they announced that the kids will not be going back to school for the last 3 weeks. And I think that was kind of the straw that's broken some parents' backs over the last 24 hours. And so I would love for us to kind of dive in, though. I want to kind of take a step back because I'd love to hear how you got to this place in your career. I want you to share with our audience about what your area of expertise is and why you are the right woman to have this conversation. Because you've done years and years of groundwork before the pandemic to make you the right person to convey this message to women and parents.
Oh, thank you so much, Jordan, for that. I think I think my story actually parallels a lot of what we're going to talk about today. I'm a clinical health psychologist. What that means is that I've been fascinated by the mind-body connection and have worked with people that basically medicine doesn't care so much about. Like, it really does not give them good service. Kind of gives them the message, well, you're just going to have to live with that. Like, we have nothing for you. For whatever reason, I've been attracted to these people. I kind of name them not so, I don't know, this may not be so correct, but the abandoned stepchildren of medicine are who I talk to. And that has meant often for the first 20 years of my career, people whose lives changed suddenly, they've had an accident and they're in chronic pain. And I loved working with those clients. I loved seeing their transformation as they came back to themselves in the most horrendous time when everything is lost and upside down and they're questioning, who they are. And for those who were open to pursuing that question, they actually got better. However, I didn't like the systems around all of that. So I started in a place where we had such a great team. It was a corporate type setting at a hospital, the only part of the hospital that makes money for the hospital. So you have a lot of managers and insurers, and you can imagine these types involved that are not involved in patient care. And it started great, where you'd ask for things, they were given, there was no question. And then there came a point where I found myself screaming on the phone with an adjuster who already, before I even spoke, had the presumption that my client was faking. And I just really was like, what is this place? How am I in this place? Right? Not the place I wanted to be. And I started to see this corporatization, this disconnect, that it was about serving an agenda and it stopped being about serving the patient. And I was feeling like this is not the place for me anymore. And the break that I got from that was my daughter coming into my life unexpectedly. So she came into my life and provided this opening for me to leave. And I decided when she was about to be born that I wasn't going to come back. And I didn't know what was going to happen next. but I wrote a beautiful goodbye letter. And that was mostly for me as part of my letting go of recognizing everything that gave me and to make sure that my future self never came back. I had no plan, but I decided I was never coming back. So my daughter comes in, and, after she was about a year old or so, and I'm walking around like in the wilderness, like I'm just asking the universe, please give me a sign. I have no idea how I'm building from here. I know I can't go back, and I don't know how to go forward. And I remember this day in particular. I was wearing my daughter, I was going for lunch with a cousin of mine, and my daughter's with me, and we're having a lovely lunch, and I'm just out there with everything. Like, I have no idea what to do right now. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know how I'm rebuilding my career. And my cousin is Dr. Tanya Williams, who is a fertility specialist in Toronto. And she says to me, "Why don't you do fertility counseling? You'd be great at that." I'm like, "Really? Tell me more." So this is where that conversation, I was like, "Yeah." She's like, you'd have to do some extra training, but you have the right background and I think you'd be a really good fit. And from there, I just started, because I'm a talker, I started just talking. Somehow the stuff about fertility is now in my awareness. I'm talking to people. I'm going to pick up my son at school, and I'm just chatting about my lunch and blah blah. And then I find out, like, all these people around me that I've been friends with have had this journey, and they're telling me how hard it was, and that they wish they'd had a chance to talk to someone. And I've had some that did get that chance and how helpful it was, but the vast majority went through a horrendous struggle. And I was like, "I can't believe you did that alone. Like, you went through what?" And so, of course, again, I'm the one who is attracted to these really hard journeys that everyone just assumes has to be horrendous, and no one's helping. This is, I guess, my lot in life. And so I do the work. It turns out miraculously, this is how the universe works. It's in my consciousness. So who pops up in my LinkedIn? I never go on LinkedIn, but somebody I know that I trained, did a performance psychology course with for years, pops up, and she is the preeminent specialist, Dr. Lisa Shatford, in Toronto in fertility psychology. So I message her. I say, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Should I do this?" She's like, "Absolutely. I'll supervise it." It was just one thing after another. It was just the support for it. And so that became the hook, right? Like, I just needed a way of saying, like, how do I start? Who am I talking to? What am I about? And that was how I actually began my private practice, was focused on infertility. I knew I didn't want to do any kind of insurance work again. And I didn't know, like, in the private practice world, where do I start? And that was it. Then the reality was, you just set up shop one day, someplace, and people are just coming to you because you're close by, right? Like, you're just like, "You're a psychologist. I need help. Like, I got anxiety." So even though I was focused mostly on serving fertility clients, what the reality was, it was a mixture of people. But the fertility clients brought me back to a love of mine from when I was training, which was women's health. And especially after becoming a mother, really appreciating the different kinds of care that I got, all the decision making that goes in along the way through pregnancy and beyond, right? Having walked that journey, I became even more dedicated to the moms. So that's the beginning of how it starts. And full circle, my daughter coming in and giving me that so-called excuse. And I operate from a place that, parenting is one of the most transformational experiences anyone can go through. And with my fertility clients, I'll tell you that I haven't actually taken the data. At one point I will, but my gut instinct is that at least like 95% of my fertility clients are high achieving women who, because of their intelligence, skill, privilege, whatever, they, they've been able to bypass the experience of not being in control. Right? They're able to use their time. They work, and they've never yet had the experience really for something they really want, where they don't get it, and it throws them for a loop. and they don't know how to deal with that. So there's a ton of distress there. And, my take on it, because I own that journey myself in terms of, I haven't struggled with fertility, but I am a, you know, perfectionistic type A-ish person in perpetual recovery. My daughter shares that journey with me. She's here to reflect that back to me, and I see the pain in her when she's a beautiful creative being. But when she compares herself to someone else, and all of a sudden all of that disappears and she falls into tears, and she's my reminder, I need to continue to work on my perfectionism. All of my clients are like this, pretty much. So, what is this about? We need to learn now that our experience matters. The perfectionist is able to go beyond anything they feel. They do, they're commenting, they're going to get the rewards, the gold stars, the acceptance, all of this. What's missing is they're having a terrible time.
Yeah, and it's almost as like it's a secret pain, right? And I mean, I
Yes,
don't think that's fertility only, but
that
certainly
it's
as
not.
you were talking about that,
Mhm.
that population and those high achieving women who have gold stars in every column on their report card except for this one,
Yeah.
that there's so much sort of shame wrapped up in all of that, but it's a very secret pain that we
Mm.
don't often see being discussed so openly. It takes a very like it takes bravery at this point to share your infertility journey openly, and yet like there's so many people that are struggling, and so why do we have to be so brave to share it, right?
Right. And we don't know what to do with the feelings because the perfectionist has shielded themselves from those feelings by so there's I always call perfectionism is just anxiety in a ball gown or a tuxedo. Like
I
it's
can
just
accept that.
it looks beautiful. It's couture. Like it's like so fantastic. But the heels hurt. Like the 4-inch heels really are painful.
Because they're things that we like societally value, right? And find we give a I would say we got give a lot of gold stars for pretty bad behavior for most people and women, where we're like, good job for staying up till 3 a.m. to finish that proposal,
Yeah.
instead of saying like, good job, you went to bed at 9:45 and look how well rested you look this morning.
Right.
And so when those high achieving women are looking for, that level of like satisfaction and self-worth is all wrapped up in that, right? It's like, where do we even start as far as like trying to unravel that?
Right. Well, where we start is when we understand what's going on. So we see that the fertility challenge has brought them into this situation, right? But there was always something underneath. None of this is new. It's just exposed that we don't not know how to deal with a new world. We were operating under the illusion that we were in control. No, you're not in control of everything. And this is an important thing to figure out because you're going to be a parent. And what better time to figure out this scenario than before your child comes to you? Most parents, when it happens the easy way, they figure they're like scrambling in the middle, going, "Oh my god, my child doesn't listen to me." What is that? Like,
They won't get in the car, and all I want is for them to
yeah,
get in the car.
yeah. And we have these reactive moments, and then we're like, "Oh my god, like I'm turning into my mother. I never thought I would be this." And like, and the distress, and like, and then we're figuring out like we got to do something. So this is the journey, and in my field, in my way of looking at things, I mean, it's interesting that I've been brought into this parenting space. So some of your listeners might know of me a little bit from a couple parenting summits that I hosted, and I got a chance to talk to these, I mean, incredible wisdom teachers, like world renowned people, that normally I would not have had a chance to meet. It was fantastic for me. I got to talk to all of them. And, in my own healing journey of doing the inner work, and this incredible time that we're in, and with all of its turmoil, it's showing us everything. There's an awareness that came to me about 4 years ago, or 5 years ago now, 2016. This is around the time when I started my practice, and the world was going through its own turmoil at that time. That was, I went through my own another of a series of spiritual awakenings, I would say, where I was really shaken by what was happening at the time. There was, I don't know if people recall, but there was a lot. This was the beginning of really showing the world how Black people were being murdered, particularly in the United States. Um, this was the beginning of the protests, and I was really, really shaken by what I was seeing and experiencing. And I had to lean on my practice. I had to like, okay, Stacy, like you've forgotten your practice for a long time. Like you need to really deeply listen, really deeply heal. And one of the things that came out of that experience for me was the understanding that the way forward could not have the same energy as what brought us here. What I mean by that, for me anyway, is that it wasn't going to come with banging down the door. It wasn't going to come with replacing the looks of the faces in the same roles in the same way. What needed was a different energy, and that energy was one of connection. And in that, I felt called by my own ancestry. I know this is going to sound weird, but literally faces of African faces coming to me, tribal faces coming to me. And it was the call that I knew that we needed to come, all of us in the Western world, bow down in humility to the indigenous people of the world and ask them to show us the way. We have become lost, absolutely lost with our westernized, industrialized world where the emphasis is on control, not on connection, on control. All of us have been traumatized by this. All mental illness comes from this. I would argue all physical illness comes from this. We have a boundary problem. We don't respect each other. We don't respect life. We don't respect the environment. We are in a place where we believe we can control nature. We need to dominate nature. And nature doesn't give a. Why is this relevant? Why are we having this conversation? We're having this conversation at a time when so much of the ills of disconnection are being revealed to us, one after the other. It's like every week, another atrocity of the dehumanization. And it's painful, painful. And we have to have this pain because the pain is the conduit, is the connector. If we can sit with the pain, we will find our way. If we take it seriously, if we don't, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. This is what happens to chronic pain. This is what happens to chronic illness. The child has been disconnected. What's the biggest predictors of chronic illness? Is chronic stress in the home. Child does not have safety. They assume the role of whatever is needed to survive that experience. They're not protected. They're not guided. There's no patience. They're in a position to take emotional care of their parents. I can't tell you how many times I ask people about their upbringing and they tell me, "Oh, I had a great childhood. Like, I had all this and that. And, my parents never put pressure on me. They always, like, if I didn't do well, they told me." And it sounds beautiful. And I said, "What did you see at home? Like, tell me more about what it was like. What did you see? What did your parents do? And what did you see? What did you experience with them? Did they did they do the things they told you?" No. Actually, this is what I experienced. I saw my mom, like, totally, she had her own business. She's working all through the night. Like, she's tired. There's the teaching. Disconnected. What is all this? All of this, why the indigenous? It's interesting. I don't know if you know this, me and my family decided to like leave Ontario and we went and lived in the Riviera for a while. We went to Mexico.
I do know this because we had to reschedule our podcast
Oh, that's right.
because of
Yeah. So I was there and I was at a very special place, a place called the Palmaya House of Aya. I highly recommend it. It is a wellness resort. So imagine, like, I'm basically in a retreat experience for 4 months with very wise teachers, indigenous teachers, shamanic teachers, and having the opportunity to talk to them about what's happening and continue to learn with them. And I was talking to the shaman in residence there, his name's Balder, at the time when this government was, it was very affronting to be away and hear, like, you're not welcome back home, essentially. And you've been bad because you did not, you left. Like, you can imagine all the issues that come up for the perfectionist in that, right? The good girl. So, but as I work through and you just, I mean, in the end, it ends up being an easy answer. You just stay where you are. We won't go back. It's fine. But in talking about like getting a perspective of what's happening is interesting to sit with the shaman and he would say, look, it's just, this is just what needs to happen. This is what needs to happen for people to wake up
Mhm.
and to understand there's no big, powerful entity that's going to care for you, that you need to do it for yourself. You need to take the responsibility. We need to actually look and see who needs care, and we need to show up that way. And it's interesting in the Yucatan, some in Mexico, there's no big government there. Like you don't work, you don't make money, and the people don't rely on it. They just do it for themselves. So you had whole communities that figured out the school. They got together in the neighborhood. They saw the kids, the parents divvied up the roles. They continued on their own. They created it. So, I mention all of this now, and the parents are freaking out. What part of this is understanding this is part of the disconnect. We have disconnected from the children. We make children's lives separate from the adults' lives. They're not actually part of the family. We have to get them separate toys. We have to like create entertainment for them. And then we wonder why it's so hard for them to participate in what's going on at home. We've shunned them. We've put them over there. They're not allowed to be with us. All they want to do is be with us. The way we've organized our lives and given people the roles, and there's no cooperation. This doesn't happen in a lot of places in the world. It happens in the westernized world. And so now women are in this position. They're working. Yes, awesome. They have their own business. Amazing. And they're taking care of everything, everyone, all the work, no cooperation, all the control, no help. It's unsustainable. And so let it break. Let this system break. Let us think about a new way and going outside of the culture to people who actually do it well, that we labeled as savages, unsophisticated. The most emotionally emotionally sophisticated people on the planet are Indigenous people in some communities that are connected to their culture still.
I'm so glad that you brought all of this up, Stacy. I love that we are going here because it brings up like it just there's a lot here. I'm excited
Yeah,
for us to like
yeah,
break
yeah.
because it's interesting. Like I've had a really difficult time over the last week or so around the news around the residential schools, and I probably am going to get emotional as I talk about it.
Yeah, as we should.
And it's interesting because my very first reaction was like, oh, nobody ever told me.
Mhm,
Right? And like you're saying, like that whole idea of like we're sucked, we're in the system and yet haven't really taken a moment to like hold our own responsibility for how
mhm,
that system keeps going. And my initial reaction was like, well, that wasn't in schooling for me, right? Like where was that? And
mhm,
then that second thought, which maybe took a day or so to go, well, where was I?
mhm.
Right. And I think that's like to like that's a micro of the macro of what
Yeah,
people are experiencing in this time, right? At first it's like we're being oppressed in this year, but then the second thought is the like, well, where was I, because I constructed this really shitty situation where all we do is work and we're not connected with anybody. And so I'm
mhm,
just seeing there's like all these themes between all of these things. But I when I was on my walk one day this week and I was thinking about all of those women and all of their children, and I was like, why ever did we think that they didn't know what they were doing?
mm.
Because
It's an
they knew
arrogance.
better than I know.
Yeah,
They knew, right? Like they knew how to live and what they were doing, and for some reason we thought that they weren't doing it right, or they didn't know what they were, or we like I can't even, I don't even know how to reconcile all of that in my brain, because it was a beautiful night and the beautiful fields and the beautiful clouds and the beautiful everything, and for some reason we thought that that woman didn't know how to raise her baby. Like
mhm.
it just like it's breaking my heart.
Yeah, and as it should. It's very traumatic. And I totally relate. I mean, I was fortunate to have found my way in Saskatchewan when I was very first positioned as a psychologist 20 something years ago. And that was when I first learned about what had the genocide our country did to these people. That was the first time I saw a completely segregated city, Saskatoon. It was deeply painful to know that my country was still doing this, to talk to like beautiful people who are traumatized in their home life situation, like can't relax in rehab because they're scared their elderly mom is going to be robbed on reserve. Not all reserves like that, but like just a level of distress and stress that is beyond comprehension. So I feel you. When we think about, oh my God, I'm just hearing about this now, and to put it in context, a lot of us will pay attention to what's happening somewhere else, like South Africa. South Africa and apartheid happened because Canada did it first. They consulted with Canada. Canada was the consultant for how to destroy the Aboriginal people in South Africa. That is the truth. That is the history. So we've all been robbed of this history, and we've all been robbed from learning. And so, when we see, we will appropriate the culture and put up like the dream catcher and sing kumbaya. We have to stop. We don't know. Better to go with humility and say, "Can I connect you?" Hear from the source. You don't need to hear from some translation, right?
Mhm.
But this is a reconciliation, and the thing is, this thing that's so beautiful is that there is a whole different way, and if the Aboriginal people in this country, our First Nations in this country, can reconnect with that. Wow. If we can learn from them, oh my gosh. If we could create something new, right? There is a beautiful new reality that can emerge that is connected. And one of the books that I'm loving right now that I highly recommend, because it'll give you perspective on everything that we're not doing well as families and a new way. Okay, so it's not about trashing ourselves, but to see perspective. It's a great book. It's called Hunt, Gather, Parent. I'm recommending it to everyone to read. I'm making my way through it. Um, and it's very relevant to women's health. It's very relevant to parenting and the frustration in this moment, because it's showing us what I always knew for a while now, but this notion of control, that this is at the horse at the site at the center of the control battles and the anxiety and the frustration with the kids, because we are operating on that assumption of control. We've been parented this way. My profession, psychology, has been a nightmare for parents. Okay, because but it's housed in like the old psychology, old way, and the timeouts and all of this reward punishment stuff. When we've now become more sophisticated in our research, we see that, oh, this is why we are probably disconnected and don't have a sense of purpose, because we've been trained to look to the outside for validation the whole time. So, Dr. Laura Markham, when I got to interview her, she brought this research to the forefront. She's the founder of Peaceful Parenting. And, they do great studies where they have these hidden cameras with the kids, and like the nice caregivers there and playing a role. So in this scenario, the caregiver is rewarding the children when she sees them or he sees them sharing. They're like, "Oh, great job. That's so great. Good for you for sharing." Like really laying it on though, right? Like every time. So then what happens, like that happens spontaneously. But what happens over time is the child stops doing it spontaneously. And the child only does it when the parent or the caregiver is around. So the caregiver is under the illusion that they have this great kid that shares, and they do have a great kid, but they don't understand that they're killing the intrinsic motivation, and they're training the child to look constantly to the environment for reassurance that they're okay, that they're doing a good job. So for the perfectionists, this is like they got lots of this, and they heaven, heaven forbid you're not perfect. Who knows what the other side of that story is, right? So we become this is the disconnect. control the behavior, make the child good for us. This is the world we were raised in, our generation. And we're just now waking up, right, with all this conversation about mental health that we don't know how to deal with emotions. We didn't have good teachers. We have to, relearn this. And the Inuits are actually amazing, incredibly emotionally intelligent people. There is no yelling by an adult ever in an Inuit home. They're extremely emotionally intelligent.
It's amazing because I often will hear women, and even when I think about myself, my own journey through postpartum
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
my early parenting years,
Mm.
which were not pretty, um, that people will admit that they don't like to be alone with themselves inside their own head, right? Like that is
Yeah.
not a safe space to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me think of that when you say that, right? That like that inability, like we're looking constantly for some kind of not just reinforcement, but almost distraction for what is truly going on.
Right.
And then it's when the lights turn off, we hop in bed and we pull up the covers and we lie there and truly have to spend five
Yeah.
minutes with our own brain. Do
Yeah.
people realize how, I'm going to use your word, disconnected they are from themselves, maybe their purpose or their what like how they actually want to live their life in alignment, and then they
Yeah.
wonder why they're awake at 2 a.m. and can't sleep.
Yeah. And it's okay. Like it is what it is. It's a reflection of the disconnect. And so the thing is, A, we don't have the education. B, been disconnected from our wisdom, right? All of we've put a lot of shame around feeling, right? Because of all the messaging. It's like, keep calm and carry on. Like when I see those posters now, it just makes me enraged, right? Like it's actually kind of cruel. It's a way of, the power dynamic saying, well, what's wrong with you? This should be fine. Just zip it, keep going.
Mhm.
Not okay. So what's the change? It's like it's a little bit of education and understanding that at any given moment, whatever's happening, it's a little bit of what's happening. Like there's a trigger here, but that trigger is triggering something underneath that's been there for a long time, a very long time. It sounds hokey, but this is the inner kid. This is the unprocessed emotions under the surface in the body, had no venue. Something happens on scene with that boom, whoosh, that moment when you cannot sleep at night, your mind is racing because of something someone said and it's so silly, but it's keeping you up at night. That's the thing. That's the sign. That's your inner kid that needs attention. But we've put so much shame around that. We're like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I must be mentally ill. There's not anything wrong with you. There's never been anything wrong with you. The problem is you just haven't learned how to care for that part. Okay. So this mental, like psychotherapy, what that is essentially reparenting. And we all came equipped with the ability. We express it all the time. We give it to people all the time. The mamas are giving it to their children all the time. And in those moments when we're reactive and we have so much shame, we're not recognizing that we have a kid already, an inner kid that feels helpless and overwhelmed and can't get control because she's thinking she has to be in control of that other being. That's impossible, right? What does she need to be able to do? She needs to be able to hold space for that feeling. She needs to be able to help regulate that feeling. Let her know it's okay and then listen. Like, okay, what's happening? It's literally the thing that we wish we would have experienced that we apply to ourselves. And what's interesting externally, the energy, the air, the atmosphere changes around you. The kids pick up on that. They're getting a model of how to self regulate. We're having different conversations, different interactions. So, all of this, everything we're talking about, what are we talking about? Is this like suck it up, buttercup, and keep going? No, this is a different energy. This is what people would call the feminine energy. I kind of cringe at the masculine feminine just because of it's all gendered in that, and we've labeled this energy as weak and unimportant. Like the Aboriginal and Indigenous ceremony I've had an opportunity to participate in. It's all about the feminine. It's all about asking permission, expressing gratitude constantly throughout the whole thing. It's incredibly moving to be in ceremony with men that are giving thanks to the mother, that are honoring the grandmother, that are praying for the women, for the healing, for the feeling of the women and the planet. Incredibly moving. Can you imagine?
I'm trying to.
Mhm. It's something you have to experience. You're gonna come with me sometime to Mexico. We're gonna do a temazcal ceremony, and you're gonna experience it.
Yes, please. It's making me think, and like, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, Stacey, like on the last year, like, so is that ability to access that part of
Mhm,
ourselves,
mhm.
is it harder when we're depleted? Like
Um,
I'm trying to imagine it from both sides, right? Like in one, like I see
mhm,
that it's more present, right? The need for it maybe is more present the more depleted people are. I'm thinking about the last year, right? And are we getting closer to accessing this, or are we getting further away? Because I see both sides that this year has brought people to their knees,
yeah,
emotionally and maybe really brought them to their knees, and it's maybe cracking open that need for change and the ability to look inwards. But I also see the potential for being so depleted that the work that's required to go there is not accessible, right? And so then there's more covering up, and there's more just like,
right,
well, I'll just do the dishes because I don't really know what else to do kind of
right, right.
experience. Like, what do you think?
Well, I think, we need support, and we need accessible support. We need to first have the idea, okay? First have the idea that something needs to change. We all have this in us, but some of us are more, you know, have more grit, I guess, in terms of just continuing on. Like, I'm gonna make it. Eventually, eventually it breaks, and it's a matter of, do I get ahead of that, or do I have to wait until I'm really in that desperate place? I mean, unfortunately, I often see people who have gotten to that desperate place. They've been so afraid, right? They've stayed with it, like the fear that drives them. So we're all trying to avoid something, right? So in this case, what you're suggesting is people are avoiding the feelings because they don't know how to deal with them. Okay, let's just name it. I don't know how to deal with it. That's why I'm avoiding it. That's why I'm doing this thing. So what's the solution? Is it possible to learn how to deal with feelings? Maybe I need some help dealing with feelings. What may happen if I knew how to deal with the feelings, if I wasn't afraid of that experience, if I wasn't shaming myself for that experience of my whole humanity and understanding it, maybe this could be easier, right? So we first need to just have that idea and understand, because we have, again, created a scenario where for you to have a feeling means there's something wrong with you. And when we think about this paternalistic, dehumanizing society, that serves it very well. You just go keep buying the alcohol, the drugs, shopping, all this stuff. It serves as consumerism, fill the void. Do you know that, the founder of marketing is actually, I think, Freud's nephew? He was the one who figured out if you tell people they're defective, then they will buy things. We have to convince you. We have to amplify the flaw in you. So now you will. This here's the solution. This is a massive. When you start to understand the level of manipulation here, you see it. You'll see it everywhere, and we should be angry.
A girlfriend and I were talking about, she said it more beautifully than I did, but she called it like
Mm.
a commoditization of women's stress, right? And it's like,
Oh,
oh, you got burnout? Like, we got a spa package for that.
yeah,
Like that's really going to be what solves the years of disconnection and lack of
right,
support and lack of
right,
intimacy and all the things that she's
yeah,
actually starving for.
yeah,
That somehow
yeah,
a pedicure is and a glass of wine is the real
right,
solution.
right. So what the first thing is holding space. And for me, like I think I mentioned a little while ago that 2016 was a real awakening year for me. And I would like to say to everyone here that there's a lot that may be coming up to the surface, and it's okay to not know at first what to do. The first thing is just to hold space. Hold space for it. right? How annoying is it when you're going through something and you tell someone and they come in with a solution right away? It's like, Jesus, like I just feel incompetent right now. And now you're coming with a solution, and now I'm getting the message. I'm not good enough. Like, this is not what I'm needing. This is not helpful. What we need, all of us, is just a holding space for what's real and what's true. And it can be messy and it can be unclear and it could be like rude or whatever. It doesn't matter. We just need to understand and trust that there's a healthy need here underneath all of this that we need to connect to and listen to. The wisdom is there. So, this is why, like for me, when I was going through that time, I needed to get back to meditation. I needed to get back to journaling. For me, that's always been my way. I mean, I go to my parents' house and I find my old journals. If you ever want to really know yourself, go look at your journal when you're 14. Woo, oh my God, I feel so much for her. Um, but I had to get it on the page and I had to practice and make that a practice. And it spoke to me a lot. Um, and this is what the beginning of holding space is. And that's why I decided that I was just going to help. The question I sat with through all of that was like, I need to be able to do something that goes beyond the four walls of my office one on one. Like I have to do something. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know, but I just sat with the question. I sat with the question for a year. And then I woke up one morning. I was like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create a guided journal, and I'm gonna help people understand. I'm gonna create a process for them so that they know that they have the answer. That like they can replicate what I do and people like me do in our role as therapists. We create the environment of empathy and compassion, and they can learn to do that for themselves. They can practice that for themselves, and they can listen. And if they do that, even that's something for free. Like that's something that anyone can do. And so I came woke up with that idea, and then I decided to do this guided journal, and I thought, who are the clients that I work with? I work with people in times of transition with impossible challenges. And when we really, really start to listen, like life-changing things arise in those moments. This is my clients taught me that it's in the chaos. The chaos is the gift. It hurts like hell. It's confusing. We don't like it, especially in this culture where we have the control. When things are out of control, we go into a lot of distress. Okay, we understand this. However, what does chaos mean? Chaos means like everything is up and down. Chaos means we're in the middle of a new form. It's a transformative time, like chrysalis time before the butterfly emerges. And the thing about us as humans is we have intentionality. This is our superpower. That we everything we see around us that humans have made, we created with our brains. There was a point in time where it didn't exist, and someone had an idea. You know what? A cup would be a good idea to hold the water. Spin my hand. Like, what might that look like? Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we create so much of our world. Everything. We create every experience. We're generating it with our brains. And so this is the power of the chaos. If we understand that, oh, this is a growth moment, this is an opportunity moment, let me learn to get quiet. Let me learn to really listen. It's going to, like, all the stuff that's been at the bottom is going to show me what the direction is, right? It's going to show me the change that's needed. So if we have this mindset, like in addition to working with people in trauma and in impossible situations, I work with people who are really high performers and need to perform when it counts. And, it's interesting when you think, like, why in the world does anyone put themselves through that for what? Like, really, like, you're going to train that hard to, like, jump that high? Why? Like, why is it? It's not necessary at all. You're going to practice this craft for hours and hours and hours. Like, why? It's not, there's no survival value. Yet it's everything. It's a metaphor. It's what we do. We actually need to create out of challenge. Challenge is something that allows us to be alive. We hook ourselves onto the challenge. And this becomes the vehicle for us to come into our purpose, which is not being a doctor or, an athlete or musician or anything like that. That I really don't care what it is you want to do, but you've hooked onto it. And for you to do well with it, you have to emerge. Your power is going to come from your presence, your expression, right? So in the end, this listening, being able to listen, it's a growth moment. It's going to be painful. It's going to be chaotic. We have to come to accept that. But if we're able to be calm enough, if we learn to connect, if we just let it out on the page, healing comes, creative ideas come, a new form comes. This is transformation. So, right now, in this moment, is the most massive time of transformation for centuries. The entire world, the same thing. And every single person is part of it. Every single person has this awareness growing inside of them of a change that is coming, that is needed, and is pulling for connection to that. So you can try to avoid it for a time. Eventually, it's going to catch up. It's bigger than any one of us. So my thing is, let's just get on board. Like, let's explore it, and let's. If you need to be supported, be supported. So what I've decided to do, like in this iteration, when the pandemic came, I was actually in Mexico, in the same place I just spent 4 months in. Okay, it's interesting the timing. It's a place I went for my birthday celebration for myself, and I was fortunate to be there at the time. And I knew I was like, okay, time is now, Stacy. Like, it's not formed. It doesn't matter. Like the thing that you want to do, the community, blah, blah, blah. We just need to start. And so the easiest way I knew how to start was on Instagram. So I started this thing called, it's very wordy, Growing Forward Soul School. And what I do every week, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, because that's the time that works for me, I'm there. And we do a journaling practice together. And the way that I do it, I call it the Flow to Grow practice. And essentially, what we're practicing is a few things, but we get quiet. We create this environment of radical self compassion. There's nothing you could possibly say, think, or feel that will ever compromise my regard for you, my respect for you, my love for you. Every single time we say that to ourselves. And then we sit with a prompt and we write nonstop for 15 minutes. No editing, no crossing out, no stopping. Go beyond the ego, beyond the critic. They can't even catch up. And then we seal it off with, some gratitude and breathing and half an hour. I've been doing it every week, every Tuesday. Haven't missed one since May, just after Mother's Day of 2020. We've been exploring boundaries for the most part, and we haven't run out of material. And then the following day, I invite someone on to just chat with me about the practice, what it's like. And it's often someone in the wellness space or an artist or something. And just because, and I do it and I share, and it's because I want this every single person to understand that this is the work. There's no shame around it. The wisdom that comes through is mind blowing. We're all tapping into the collective consciousness that runs through all of us. We all have access to. It may come out in a slightly different form, different times, but there's truth there. And when you start to really access your truth, it's addictive. It's like, I want to do this. I want to stay connected. And this is how we become wise. This is how we start to, like, when we're triggered in the moment, we're like, okay, this is the stuff. This is the stuff right here. If I can get quiet and listen to that, I've just unpacked some things I don't need to carry in my body anymore. This is how I can heal this. And I can bring my most loving inner parent to this experience and really reconnect with my vulnerability. No shame. No shame. Okay. So this is where you start to actually get into a mode where this is when people talk about being really conscious, really awake. It's like, I welcome the disruption. I want this experience. I'm okay with it. It is painful, but I know that there's something for me in here. There's something I need to let go of. There's something more that needs to emerge. That's what growth is. We kind of just talk about like additive, like My friend and colleague, Dr. Shafali, who I just love, just watch every interview you can with her. She's just so good, so good. Um, when I was just formed my journal, I went to see her speak for the first time. At the end of her talk, it was like a mic drop moment. She said, "Growth is not additive; it's deconstructive," and that is the truth. So again, when we start to really get real and accept that this is the process, you just look at a plant. You'll see the dead leaves along with the new ones, right? This is how it is. Work out. You have to break down the muscle if it's going to grow stronger. That it's no different with our emotional personal growth. That things need to fall away. Everything that we created, all the ways we adapted, served us. It's not pathology. It's brilliance. We are brilliant creatures at adapting. The only problem is we're stuck in the past. So when we're triggered, that's the past coming back to revisit us. And if we're ready for it, then we can heal. Then we can see, oh, what's the big deal with me sharing my voice? Like, okay, so if they don't like it, I'm willing, let's just see what's going to happen. I don't need to be afraid. I want to know what the truth is now. Let's wake up. Let's come out of the trance of fear. Let's see what's real. I want to know the truth. So a lot of the stuff that we are talking that comes up when you see people in that reactivity, when you yourself, this is a wounded, traumatized being. They are in fear. They are in a trance. They're not connected to what's actually happening right now, and they don't know how to do it. So my thing is like, what drives me? Like, I really sincerely am motivated for there to be no need for my profession. I want to experience that world. I can do other things. I'm an endlessly creative being. I could do lots of different things, right? I would love to see that. And this is why, in whatever capacity I have, I want to bring as many people into this awareness so they can start to free themselves from the past and learn to be connected. And what's so amazing about this time in the privileged role that I have is that people who have this idea and they've started, the transformation is happening so quickly right now. And that is entirely connected to this time that we're in. This is an energy, a rebalancing that's happening. We've used this term toxic masculinity to talk about men. The fact is, the entire westernized world is toxically masculine. And this new energy needs to emerge to reset this balance. And it is connected. And this is where, when you have this get her done type of power, right? Which we all have, right? This is what we lean on. And it's informed by the connection, the wisdom. This is true power. This is true, like wise action, right? Beautifully informed by connected and has the power to get her done, put it in the world, see it happen, right? So this is what I hope I have the capacity to experience on a massive scale, and it requires each of us. We don't have to create anything mammoth or whatever. Literally, quite literally, each person taking this on, say, okay, I'm going to learn how to listen. I'm going to be grounded in my why. I'm going to be dedicated and committed to putting it in the world to see what happens.
I feel like I could listen to you talk for like 48 hours straight. And what I'm finding so wonderful about this, about listening to you, is, when I first thought about having this conversation, I was like, okay, I want to talk about how challenging this time has been, and let's talk about it in the context of parenting, because parents are suffering.
Yeah.
And then to bring it to this space where we're talking about, literally our ideas of what we thought the world were being burned down. Our ideas around what we thought productivity should look and feel like is being burned down. Our idea
Mhm.
about what we need is being born, or a new idea around what we
Um,
need as far as structure and whatnot is being born. We cannot unsee what we've learned in the last year about people and communities and racism and oppression. And we just can't. That the sucky parenting is actually just completely necessary in this moment because it's going to be the vehicle that transforms some of what people build after this. That if it was 2 weeks of your kids being stuck home, this is terrible, they're interrupting my Zoom call. I don't
Mhm.
know if we would get like that depth of change, right?
Right, right.
It just wouldn't happen. And
Mhm.
now the chronicity, although the chronicity I think is showing up in the way people feel and
Yeah,
their level of burnout,
yeah.
etc.
Mm,
But it's also forced us to sit way longer with all of it than we ever would have under our own steam,
right.
which brings up the ugly feelings and all of the ugliness about it. And maybe that's going to give us a shot at doing it differently the second go around.
Yeah. And, you know, I think all of that begins with, the deep listening. There needs to be deep healing, right? The kids, ugh, you know, let's just acknowledge no one learned much this year. Like, really? What's the most important thing? It's not the grades. It's their health and their wellness. And the parents are not disconnected from that. Remember, the kids, we're all connected in this house, in this home. And so when the parents are good, the kids are good. And the fact is the parents can't do it all and the mom certainly can't do it all. And so what's the new model? Maybe it's more collaborative. Maybe every person gets to matter equally. One of the things I've suggested to the parents is having like a weekly chat, like check-in. And it doesn't matter how old the kids are, it's the baby. We can maybe reflect on the baby and what the baby needs. But each person around that table, just talking about, what went well and what was hard and what's needed to make it better. And everyone else listening with the ear and the intent of how they can help. How can they help do that for that person? Each person in the family getting their chance because we're all connected. And having that really democratic, diplomatic, like everyone coming together, understanding we're all connected and affect each other. Cooperation, collaboration. It works better every time. A different energy, like real team, not like, one person doing all the work while everyone else is chilling on the couch and watching a movie like that. No, no. Everybody gets to have a good experience. Everybody gets to be healthy and well. And we support each other in that without apology. This is the way. This is the only way I can see forward. The only way. And I think that we're ready for it. And it requires letting go of the control to allow the help in to receive it. So this is the other thing that often we're not used to, right? We're not used to being seen. We don't want the vulnerability to be seen. Maybe we're irritated that people don't do it the right way. And this is can be part of the dynamic that keeps us in the same place that we don't want to be. So again, when we are able to come towards our own vulnerability, our own yearning, our own need, and care about it deeply, and decide we're going to align with it, help this younger part of ourselves that didn't get seen. We know what they've been through and what they're needing, and then allow ourselves to receive. Allow the thing not to be perfect and to see that people are actually caring. Take it in. Take it in. Let your story be messed with. That you're the only one that does it. You don't want that. What do you want? Okay, let's align everything with what you actually want to experience and don't get in the way. It's possible.
It's totally possible. We say often to women, ask for help, but then like, can you just accept the damn help, right?
Mhm.
Like there's
Yeah,
two parts to that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, but you're right, like the letting go of the outcome, of how it turns
yeah,
out, that
yeah,
it's not easy, right? And I even think like that's kind of what was modeled for me. It was that I couldn't, I wasn't really great at tidying up my room in the first place, but even if I did, it got done over, right? And so that idea that like if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself is
mhm.
is not really serving any of us at this point.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's beautiful to understand where that comes from and the model, the belief system that you were operating under. And so, in my practice, I call my practice Design Your Life. And, we say some things, like we come up with something that sounds good, and then we understand the deeper meaning. Our subconscious works in an interesting way. And when I first came up with that idea for practice Design Your Life, it was because I was asked to write a column in a design magazine. I'm like, what is a psychologist? I'm like, okay, design your life. And the person who invited me was like, oh my God, like I was working with them on branding, like, that is your brand. There you go. So that became the title of my practice. But, when the deep meaning behind that, what I've come to discover, sometimes it works that way. You put something out there and then you realize, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because what we're essentially doing is identifying the patterns that we've designed our lives on, right? That's based on a belief system. Everything is belief, right? So you created a belief a long, long time ago, and you created a pattern, and that pattern was to survive. Okay, so it's to shield yourself from ever experiencing the bad thing again. And we're just stuck in the past, and it works. It works beautifully. And again, the system change and it doesn't work anymore. Something needs to change. This is the call to action. This is the anxiety. This is the health condition. This is the stress, the depression, whatever it is. It is the call for a new model. We need to look at this belief. It's not working anymore. And so when we become conscious of these things, then the intentionality kicks in. We're like, okay, we can do them. We can redesign. We can, like, what is that person over there? Look, she's got great boundaries. She seems to have it all together. What belief system is she operating under? What is that? Let's identify that. What's the pattern that we could use to reinforce that? What is the pattern breaker that's going to allow us to wake up to understand that what we experienced before isn't necessarily going to happen now? And even if it does, you can deal with it. You need to have an experience. Let's break the pattern. What's it got to be? What's it gonna be? It's interesting. Can I give you just a I know we're probably running out of time, we talked for a long time. Can I give you a little tiny, tiny example?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, type A. Never be late. You're never ever late. Something bad's gonna happen if you're late. That's the mindset that I've been operating under. When I was taking my kids to school, come on, come on, we're gonna trauma. And then we're like breathing on the way and there's nice intention. But this pattern and it's exhausting. And I'm just like talking to the kids, like, kids, like, what do you think about the mornings? What's going on? Like, can we do it better? And we collaborate and we come up with something better. And it's good for a while until kids, we don't have to drive the kids to school anymore. And I'm leaving the house. I'm like, I gotta go, like trauma. I'm like, okay, Stacy, this is ridiculous. I got to stop this. I have to stop this. This is stupid. And I'm creating this environment I don't like. So I had to sit there and think, okay, what is it? What is the mindset that I have? What's the belief? You're going to run out of time. There's no time. You don't have enough time and you're going to get in trouble. You're going to be late and you're going to get in trouble. Makes no sense. I have no practice. My clients are not going to be that mad, but that's what's driving this reaction. So, like, all right, repattern. Okay, we got to repattern. What is the new belief? I have an abundance of time. If I actually have an abundance of time, if I truly believe that, how do I move through space? What is that morning like? Yeah, I'm chill. I'm moving slow. That's what you got to do. You got to move slow. So, new pattern. I have an abundance of time. Slowly putting things away, slowly saying hi and bye to the kids, walking slowly to my car, driving the speed limit. Like everything on purpose is slow. Slow, slow, slow. I have abundance of time. Sit down, open the computer, look at the time. I got 3 minutes to spare. That was the reality. I have an abundance of time. That's what I mean. When we start to address these core beliefs that are running the show and we decide we want to wake up to what's real, we live in a completely different world. So that's what I mean by design your life. Design the new pattern. Break free from the past. Allow yourself to experience the experience that's available to you. But we have to understand the beliefs. Let go of the old ones, invite the new, repattern, and break that. What I did was a pattern breaker. I broke the pattern because I woke myself up to reality, to what's real now.
I really feel like we could talk forever.
I know.
And I wanted to say like one more thing there. Like that the creating space and just sitting in it, I feel like
Mhm.
is such a valuable take home message. And I'm going to put the links to all the things you talked about
Yeah.
in the show notes. So even your guided journaling on
Mhm.
Tuesdays, all of those things, because that really what that is creating the space for those feelings. And I liked your term deconstruct. And we talk about deconstructing knowledge and science all the time. And that's one of the ways that we get away from bias, right? Is that we
Mhm.
take all the new ideas and we take our old ideas and we throw them in a blender and we figure out what's true in this moment.
Mhm.
And yet so much of those patterns are built like bias on top of belief on top of automatic pattern on top of reinforcement, and we get farther and farther away from the truth actually because we're
Mhm. Yeah.
not like breaking it down and deconstructing and sitting in all of the crap.
Mhm.
That's what made me think of is that like really good scientific process is breaking things down all the time. And yet
Mhm.
we've made that this like the most vulnerable thing ever for us to sit and think about how we feel about, even just the things that are showing up in our world right now. We've made that a scary experience when it is an absolutely necessary experience. So I just wanted to circle back to that because I think that that's like that creating that space, and that we don't have to do something right this second, but creating that space for the discomfort and sitting with all of this is probably what creates the more long-term change. Even I
Absolutely.
have been like a little bit guilty of that over the last week. I'm like, which charity am I going to give to? Right? Like because that's like my initial reaction is just that I need to do a thing
Mhm.
when really what I need to sit with is all of it. And yes, I still need to donate to the charity. However, but like not make it just like about actions and also make it about like long-term
Yeah.
feelings and that deeper change.
Absolutely. Because sometimes we do that action quickly so that we can get rid of it. And this is an amazing opportunity to literally be part of creating a new world. We are on the vanguard of something, and it can go different ways. So, if we really want to have an impact, if we really want to create a legacy, our Iroquois nation, 7 generations, that's how far they think in advance. Like their actions, the impact 7 generations from now. What's that going to look like? This is where we really pause and consider that really, again, simple, just healing within myself, noticing all the assumptions and the things and the tensions, exploring that compassionately. Like we don't have to put ourselves down. And what does this tell us? What needs to emerge? And your kids get to benefit from that. And then they get to maybe do the same thing and pass that on. And here we go.
You have such a beautiful message, Stacey, and a beautiful story. Um, as we close for today, which I'm grateful that we spent extra time on this topic because it was so needed. Can you just remind my listeners how they can connect with you? Because now they're
Yeah.
all going to want to. And I feel like you need to lead a healing session for the entire province of Ontario.
Wow. I mean, it's interesting. I've had visions of like, what kind of interventions could we do with like beautiful music by the lake and just everyone just chill out. Like, I just have dreams of that kind of thing. We'll see. But certainly you can just Google drstacythomas.com and you will come to my website, and it might bounce you to a website that's about to launch, which is for the Design Your Life Center, which with my team. So that's one way to connect with me. If they're interested, again, the Growing Forward Soul School is just a little side project of mine, a heart based project fully that will evolve over time. So you can look up that on Instagram. And if you happen to be up Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you'll see me there and just join in. And if that's not your thing, you can go to the link in the bio and sign up. And we just send you the recordings and you can do it on your own time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for creating the space for this conversation, Stacey. I'm so grateful.
I'm so grateful for for having the opportunity to connect with you, Jordan, and having this really needed conversation at this time.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health.
Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.